Thank you. So yeah, I wanted to share 5 of my tips. I'll come back to what those 5 are. It's just because in this room, I'm assuming we're all super librarians, obviously because we're amazing, but also because we are the one who have access to everything in Koha. And usually the quickest way for you to have access to everything in Koha is to have the staff permission called super librarians. And there are probably some of you who have been with Koha quite a few years, so you know all about Koha. But just in case, I wanted to maybe remind you of something. And there's always new people coming into the teams, coming into the libraries, starting to use Koha, and that means they weren't there when they did the training with one of us, and they may not know all of those tips. So why 5? Well, it's because Lauren only gave me 15 minutes, and that's all I can do in 15. But this is what I wanted to talk about today. And it's both from my own experience at Newcastle Library and being a super librarian, moving to Koha, but also what I've seen coming into support tickets. What are the questions people are asking? What things we told you 7 years ago and you forgot because you never used it since then? That's totally fine. So we are here to remind you about that. It's also quite a varied sort of tips, hopefully, but it's also to remind you with being a Koha super librarian, you have the power. With Koha, you have access to so many configuration options in the staff interface. It's up to you to decide how you want to configure your system. You don't have to ask us. There are still things you have to ask us, but most things you are able to do all of this yourself, and you should really make use of that power. So let's go straight in and talk about staff accounts. So if you have a new member of staff coming into the library, you don't need to contact us to ask them to ask us to create an account for them. You can do that yourself. And you just create a user in the normal way as if you were registering a library member. That's how it starts. You may have a special category for your staff. I would recommend it. It just makes it easy to keep track who's in your staff group. And then you go into the permissions. So let's look at those permissions. So I'm on a user account here. I went into that more button, set permissions, and this is the screen I landed on. So this is where I can give access to all library functions if they are going to be the new super librarian in my library, or actually I can go into a bit more details and only give them some permissions, so they'll only have access to some areas of Koha. The interesting question comes, what if you have more than one new staff starting, or what if you have over 100 members of staff across the whole library service? So there are 2 tips. The first one is you can copy the staff permissions. That's quite new. I think it came in one of the 24.5 or 24.11. I'm looking to Fiona because I know she did a video on this, so you can look at it. And there's this new button called copy settings. So if you have staff that have very specific permission because they're in a team and there's only 4 of them, you can just copy those permissions here and then go to another user and go into their permissions. And then just paste, and there you go. They're going to have the same permissions from my previous. The other trick, if you do have dozens or hundreds of staff, there's a plugin that lets you put stuff into lists and have a template user that says, maybe it's my acquisitions team user, and everybody I put in that user list, then they're going to have the same permissions as the acquisitions team user. So that's for staff account. Let's have a look at, and the other thing with staff accounts is if you're creating the account for them, the first thing you ask them is to update their password. Let's think about security. And maybe if you enable or enforce 2-factor authentication, they'll have to go through that as well. Right, so the other thing is making your life easier. And what doesn't make my life easy is when I create a patron or I edit one, and the form actually takes several scrolls to go through all of it. But actually, I don't need all those fields. It's just because Koha is used by many types of libraries who need different fields. So some library will use some fields, other library will use other fields, but it's very rare to see a library that uses everything. So to make your life easier and your colleagues' life easier as well, it's better to have a shorter form. And you can do that through a system preference, or two system preferences actually. So the first one is called borrow unwanted fields. And it's going to allow you to just say, these are the fields I don't want to see in my form, and just shorten your form. It's also quite good if you're thinking about data protection compliance, just what I mentioned it, because it means people won't be putting data in this form, and it's not data you have to think about the fact that you hold it and why you hold it and justify it. You can just not have it. So borrow unwanted field is the answer. I'll just show you what it looks like quickly, if I manage to spell it. And it's this one here, and it looks like this, and this is where, in case you didn't realize, that Koha does have a lot of fields for the patron form, and all the ones that are ticked are the ones that are going to be hidden. And the other trick is to make use of the collapse fields patron form, and it's probably less used, but it's one that is going to allow you to hide sections within the form as well. And when they're hidden, they're going to appear at the top. You're going to be able to click on them, and then they'll reappear when you need it. So maybe some users, you need those sections, and some users you don't. So you can use the collapse and then just click on them when you need them. Just another thing about the borrow unwanted field, there are similar things for the self-registration form. I'm not going to attempt to read the name of that system preference. And the same thing where the user looks at their account details in the library catalog. So that one is the self-modification one. And you can do exactly the same thing. Possibly you'd want all three to match, but that's really up to you. Okay, so that was tip number 2. Number 3, drop-down menus. Almost everywhere in Koha where you see a drop-down menu, it's controlled by an authorized value. And it's whenever you need to add a new shelving location, create a new collection, or add another school to your list of schools for children participating in the Summer Reading Challenge. All of this you can update yourself in the authorized values. So what you would be doing is just go to administration. Let's close that massive list. And underneath the settings here, the basic parameters, I've got authorized values, and they're grouped in categories. So I just mentioned collection codes. So I could look for collection, and there it is. Its code is actually C code. And this is where I'll be just adding all my new ones. One thing we see in supported, so I really wanted to highlight it, is when you create a new value, so a new collection within that category, it asks you for an authorized value and a description. That authorized value field is a code. Please do not put any spaces. No, never, ever, because that's going to break your system somewhere. So there are some specific rules about what can go in this field, but the description is the label you'll see across the site, and you can put anything in that. Okay, that was tip number 3, watching the clock. The next tip is about close days. There is somewhere in Koha calendar, and again, that's one of the things that gets easily forgotten, but it's actually quite useful if your library either has annual closures or temporary closures, and it's used for circulation rule. And that means if you put your close date in the calendar in the tools, and an item is being issued, its due date, if its due date was going to fall during a close day, then you are able to control what it's going to do. So there's a system preference called use days mode that's going to act as the default. And it has 3-4 options. It has an option that says, okay, if the due date was if I apply, maybe I'm lending books for 4 weeks. So if I'm issuing this book and in 4 weeks, actually the library is closed because it falls on Christmas Day. It's a bit early for now, but let's imagine. So with use days mode, I can say, okay, well, push the due date automatically to the next open day, which may be the 2nd of January. Or it has the option of that understanding that maybe some of your library users are only able to come to the library on a Tuesday. So if you push to the 2nd of January, if it's not a Tuesday, then my system preference has that option to push to the next open day, which is the same day of the week that it would have landed on otherwise. And there's an option to ignore the calendar. I'll come back to that one. And there may be another option which I can't remember right now, but hopefully that's the main one covered. So It's really useful because it means you'll never be in the situation where you have a library member that says, well, I couldn't return my book because on this, the date it was due because the library was closed. So just use the calendar and have a look at the use days mode. Okay, I did mention use days mode had an option to ignore the calendar. So what's the point? The point is actually that use days mode also exists in the circulation rules table, which means you can set it differently. So you have your default in the system preference, but you can set it differently depending on the rule. So it means for some users and some item types, you can have a different behavior. And I've had this a few months ago with a college. We were looking at the rules for their laptops. So the college was closing for half term. So they wanted the booked due date to be pushed back until after half term. But for the laptops live independently in locus where it's a bit more self-service. So they wanted the laptops to still be due back on their date because they could still be returned. So in this case, we changed the days mode column in the circulation rule for the laptops being lent to students. And finally, you may have seen this very cryptic message, too many loads, 0 issued, only 0 are allowed. So recently, actually it's not that recent, it's a couple of years ago now, but you get that yellow message and it used to have only that 0 issued, only 0 are allowed, but now it has more information, it's great. So it has the information about why 0 issued, only 0 are allowed. So on this screenshot, it's telling me maximum loans calculated from the circulation rule for reference, all patrons category, all libraries. And it says this user can borrow the item according to this library circulation rule. In this case, I have an extra indication because I cheated a bit to get that message for the screenshots. It also tells me the item type is just not followed. It's like, okay, fair enough. But yeah, when you see that message, it means somewhere in your circulation rule, something says no. So using that information, you can go to see, we all love to look at the circulation rules, right? So we're gonna have to go and find that rule. The other trick with the circulation rule table, if you are in a library service that has more than one library, is like, okay, it says the circulation rule for this library, but which library? In which case you need to check the circ control system preference to find out if it's the library the item belongs to, the library the user belongs to, or the library you're logged in as. Usually, for most systems, it will be the library you're logged in as because it makes sense as a member of staff, but I know each library has their own way of doing things, and that's why those options exist. So when I get that message, but I still have the option to issue it and say, yeah, I know it's not followed, but I'm going to issue it anyway, or I need to issue it now, and then I'll deal with the problem later. If I issue it, my due date is actually going to be today, which is not useful for the library member. But that happens because my circulation rule says 0 loans for this item type and this user category, and 0 loans for 0 days, right? It's not allowed. So that's why Koha applies the rules, 0 days, so that's due back today, it's totally fine. So if you do force that issue, that if you go yes issue, you will have to use the loan settings. So it's that little extra step to actually manually enter your due date. So it's due date that makes sense for your library member. Okay, so when you see that problem, this is the quick fix. You still issue when you manually enter the due date. And then afterwards, you check your circulation rules to see is there anything that should be changed. I know when again, it's a long time ago when at Newcastle we moved to Koha, but we saw that message and we realized we are missing some circulation rules. So it's just an indication that we need to add more to our circulation rule table. The other tip, if you do have items that are not followed, but sometimes they go out followed, you can have in your circulation rule that says 0 loans allowed. You can have a loan period. So you can say in your rules that says 0 loans allowed, but 7 days loan. That means when you do force the issue, when you get that yellow message, it will apply that 7 days loans, which is better than due back today. So that's another little trick you could be using. Okay, bonus tip really quickly. You're using Koha. Koha changes all the time. Your library service changes all the time. So it's about keeping up with what could be useful for you, what could make your life easier and help your colleagues and your library users. One of my tips would be to read the Koha community newsletter because it pulls together articles and videos published by Koha suppliers like us and others around the world. So it's like an aggregator of things, new things that people are talking about. And you can find it at this link. It's always fun to have a look at your system preferences. I mean, it's a personal opinion, but it's always fun because you always come across when you're like, I didn't know that existed. The only caveat I would put for that, and again, personal experience, is you change the system preference, and then your colleague brings you 2 hours later and says, oh, this doesn't work anymore. And I'm like, I know exactly how to fix it because I broke it by changing my system. And obviously, did say Koha changes, you get upgrades. So we try to create release notes for you because they are massive, because there are so much new and modified things. So do have a look and obviously talk to each other, see what's helpful for everyone. And that's it for today. Thank you.